Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll give everyone just a few more moments to get started, and we'll all for joining our first Sage Intacct webinar of the year, the latest updates in Sage Intacct 2019 Release 1. I'm Megan Manrique, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go over how to use your webinar console. The orange arrow on the right side of your screen should let you toggle the control tray open or closed. And at the bottom of that control tray, you'll see a chat window. So feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar via that chat function. We'll either get to them during Q&A towards the end or follow up with you offline if we don't have enough time. I know we've got a lot of awesome content today. Additionally, on your GoToWebinar console, you should see an area for audio settings. If you're calling in through your telephone, please choose the Use Telephone option, and alternatively, if you're using your computer speakers, please select the Use Mic and Speakers option. And lastly, I would like to note that today's webinar is being recorded, so we will send out the slides as well as a link to the on-demand recording of the webinar within 48 hours. So definitely keep an eye out for that message if you're interested in accessing the webinar after today or sharing it with any of your colleagues who couldn't make it with us live this morning. And of course, I think for hopefully an exciting difference in this year's webinars that we haven't been able to do before, we are excited to be able to offer you guys CPE this year. To qualify for CPE, just remember that you need to be using your own computer, not a smartphone, and log in with your own information, unique URL. Can't be, multiple people in the same room. If you each want to get CPE credit, and then definitely be logged into our GoToWebinar here for at least 50 consecutive minutes within the scheduled time frame of the webinar. Actively respond to at least 75% of the polling questions. Don't worry if you don't get them right, that's okay. You need to be participating in those polling questions, and then definitely remember to complete the evaluation survey at the end of the webinar. Those are the requirements set for us by the Board of Accountancy, so just make sure that if you're looking for CPE, you follow in with all of those, and I'll try and remind you guys throughout the webinar as well. And with that, I'll introduce you to today's presenters. First up, we've got Brenda, who's a senior manager on the Sage Intacct team here at Armanino. She's got over 20 years of accounting experience in Big Four public accounting and in-house as a controller, where she's led Sage Intacct implementations for a large global nonprofit. We're great to have you with us today, Brenda. We also have Irene, who is also a senior manager on Armanino's Sage Intacct team. Irene has over 30 years of accounting experience and has been involved in implementing accounting software solutions throughout her career. She's presented on accounting topics, functionality, and business improvement, and has spoken nationally at conferences, including the Sage Intacct Advantage Conference, which I'm sure many of our audience here have attended previously. It's great to have you both here today. So with that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Brenda to kick us started with our learning objectives and then our agenda.
Excellent. Thanks, Megan. So in keeping with our new CPE requirement, we want to cover our learning objectives. We want to discover the official approval process for bills created in accounts payable, examine the streamlined user experience through the new Action UI, or not so new for those of you who switched over to it a while ago, better support of higher volume reconciliations and significant improvements for ease of use. We'll evaluate the added capabilities for smoother, faster, and more accurate allocation process, and investigate the Sage Intacct Action UI with enhanced efficiency, increased personalization, and continued innovation. And we'll experience better insight into your inventory in order to connect it back to your original estimates. So a lot of exciting updates here today. Our agenda, of course, we've got updates in these areas that we're going to cover today: user experience, general ledger, accounts payable, cash management, projects, contracts, inventory, our Salesforce integration, reporting and dashboards, platform and web services, global consolidations, administration, and more. All right, so diving right into the user experience here, as all have probably noticed so far, Action UI is now the default. So what that means is new users, now when they log in, they'll automatically be in the Action UI, or they can switch themselves. You can see we've got a screen clipping here of the big switch to Action UI, that big blue button. You'll see it in the top right-hand corner next to your name if you are not already in the Action UI. So there's a whole bunch of features that they've been issuing over the last year and a half or so that are now only available in the new user interface, the new Action UI. And that's the new AP pay bills. They released that last summer, and that allows you the AP workbench, sometimes referred to as, much easier to apply credits that way. The interactive custom report writer, global consolidations, the new bank reconciliation module that was done in this release. Irene's going to cover that. Enhanced reports menu, viewing reports from the reports center has changed. Global favorites menu when you're using the Action UI. Drag and drop attachments enhancement. So now there's some exciting features there you might want to take advantage of, as well as multi-select, clearer visibility on multi-select reports. So definitely encourage everybody to switch over to the new Action UI. As it's now the default and no longer beta, I do imagine that this interface is going to be going away sometime this year. So for right now, you can switch back and forth between the two. It's really great to be able to, if you can't find something on the new menu, switch into the old menu, go and find that thing, and then switch back into Action and see where you are. But once the old user interface goes away, that kind of crutch that will help you transition is going to go away. So definitely encourage you to transition to this prior to the other one going away. All right, and right into our first polling question.
Thank you, Brenda. So up on your screen, we've got our first poll. It is, what Sage Intacct modules is your organization using? Check all of them that apply. We know that this doesn't quite cover every single module that you guys might be using, so hopefully it captures your main ones. Of course, your options here are, of course, core, which I think most of you are probably using, projects, contracts, inventory, and Salesforce integration. So we'll give everyone just a few moments here to answer that question. Of course, as a reminder, if you are looking for CPE, you need to participate in at least 75% of the polls. We've only got 4 poll questions today, so I recommend checking into them as many as you can. But we will give everyone just a few more seconds here, and then we will close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. And of course, like we expected, a lot of folks are using core. Brenda, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, this is exactly what we wanted to see. It doesn't look like very many of you are using inventory, but this definitely helps us because we know that a lot of the releases have been really heavily focused on projects, contracts, and Salesforce integration. So it's not a surprise that the majority of you listening today probably have one of those options there. All right. Thanks for that. Over to you, Irene.
Thank you, Brenda. Yeah, the polling questions are really helpful, so we appreciate you guys participating. They'll help us as we continue through the PowerPoint presentations. When we do these, make sure we're focusing on the right things, so thanks for that. General ledger.
Yeah, and as we said, there's no wrong answer.
Right, no wrong answer, exactly right. All right, let's start with general ledger. The beauty of general ledger is, as we just saw, right, everyone's using general ledger. You pretty much have to if you're using Sage Intacct. So we always get excited when there are new releases that are related to the general ledger module, and there's a couple good ones this time. The first one is not something that is often needed, but if you ever do need to move from a single accounting method to a dual accounting method, example, you're on accrual right now and you need to move to accrual and cash, Intacct has made that process simpler. You've always been able to do it, but it was a little bit cumbersome, was very error prone, and now they've streamlined that and done a step-by-step process, making it easy for folks if you do need to make that change in your accounting method. A couple of steps there. You're going to make sure your transactions are all posted, including reversals. You're going to make sure your books are closed for whatever the cutoff month is when you're going to be switching that set of books. Select the option and an as-of date in the general ledger configuration. So there's some options there to help with that. Create a few new set of journals for cash accrual or cash and accrual, depending on what you're switching to. And then select the new journals in the configuration screens for all the different modules that you're using. If you do decide that you want to make this method, we still ask that you reach out, research it a little bit, talk to the folks at Intacct or here at Armanino, and make sure that you have all your ducks in a row if you make this change, so that it goes smoothly and easily and there's no issues. Another really nice new feature in General Ledger is bulk actions for journal entries. So for those of you folks that have a lot of journal entries, you've probably noticed this. In the journal screen where you're looking at your transactions, you go to General Ledger, Journal Transactions, and you view your transactions. You can see all of the journals that need to be posted, as an example. So if you've got a bunch of them that are on draft because of the policies that you have, you want to post them all at the same time, you've got a multi-select button there, so you can pick and choose all of the entries that you want to post, or duplicate or reverse. So a really nice new feature in the General Ledger. A caveat here, of course, is that if you're at the top level, your entries will stay at the top level. If you do it in the entity level, they're going to be in the entity level. Another nice new feature is the ability to include or not include top-level transactions when you are within an entity. So when you start looking at the lists in Intacct, bills, receipts, different areas of Intacct, you see a little checkbox, include top-level transactions. By default, that is not checked. So when you slide in and look at your bills list, you're only seeing bills that have been entered in the entity, and you now have the choice as to whether or not you want to include those that are at the top level. So couple nice new features in this release related to the General Ledger. And my personal favorite, if you are doing any sort of exporting of the General Ledger to Excel, you can now have the account number on each line of your export CSV file. Yay! Very exciting. It's very helpful for pivot tables and things like that. Note that it is only for the CSV export. It is not general Excel export, so it has to be a CSV export. Little checkbox. If you scroll down on the General Ledger report, if you scroll down about 3/4 of the way, you'll see that little checkbox to include the account on each line. And then, of course, when you export a CSV, it'll be there. You will not see this account number if you preview the report, even though you have it checked. So it's only visible once you actually export to Excel. I know many of you on the call are going to be using that new feature. And last, the new tools for dynamic allocations. That's the new module that Intacct released last year. Wonderful module if you need more sophisticated allocations. So they continue to make enhancements to this. There's now the ability to create a group allocation so that you can process several allocations all at the same time with a single click. Very much an efficiency feature there. Also, under the allocation definitions, they're having a lot more options, allowing you greater flexibility when you're defining your source, your basis, and your target. So you can do book stacking in the source and the basis. There's a dynamic relative account balances statistical option that's in there now. Project billing into the target allocation. So if you want to include billing, that's going to be on a generate invoice from the project module. And then more time period options under the source and the basis. So lots of little enhancements there for those of you that are utilizing and enjoying that new module, dynamic allocations. Brenda.
Yeah, and also good for those of you that hadn't subscribed to the dynamic allocations yet because it didn't yet have those features. Also good to know. That's something that Intacct does quite frequently, is that they will often, do a release of a module, and then over the next couple releases, they'll keep increasing and making more robust the functionality within that module.
For sure.
And the long-awaited bill approvals. So for many of you on the call today, you may have the purchasing module for the sole reason to get approvals on bills prior to having them be posted. And it might be being done just by business users, or it might be being done by employee users as well. So the good news is that the bill approvals within accounts payable are available to both business and employee users, and they're available on both bills and recurring bills. One of the caveats is that you cannot have any partial approvals. So for instance, you can enable in purchasing, you can enable line item approval. You cannot do that in AP bill approval yet. It may be on the roadmap, it may be coming. And then approvals right now can only be done in 3 manners. The value approval, non-progressive, so just a straight value approval, a value approval by transaction department, which would be a progressive approval, or having approvals go to a named user. So similar to like the allocations, we would expect that they're going to be, and they have already said that they're going to be releasing additional approval methods in future releases. So for now, if you do have other types of approval routing, you may want to keep with the purchasing module, but keep an eye out on future releases to see if they add and what approval routings become options in the next couple of releases, because I do anticipate there will be more. Okay, and then the other one, so this is similar to what Irene had mentioned in the general ledger, but it's also available within accounts payable. So it's similar to that functionality, but now on the pay bills screen, which is not a list view, as Irene was mentioning. Pay bills is actually a workflow. So this is what allows you to have filter out those top level transactions and hopefully not run into any issues any longer where you've paid a portion of a top level transaction or gotten an error when you go to confirm that check run. All right, back to you, Irene.
Excellent, thank you. Cash management. New release this time around is an exciting new bank reconciliation screen. Again, as mentioned previously, only available in the Action UI. So you're not going to even see it on the menu if you're not in the new Action UI. So please, please make sure you're switching to that Action UI if you haven't yet. Really, you will love it. You'll benefit from it. Things are very efficient in the Action UI. So new bank reconciliation feature, and they really streamlined it and made it much more efficient than the old bank rec. So the first thing is a new front screen. So when you first start the bank reconciliation, as you can see on the right, it's a much smaller screen, right? You're just putting in the account that you're going to reconcile. You're putting in your beginning balance cutoff date, statement ending date, depending on if this is your first reconciliation or not, and if you're going to be importing your bank transaction file into the new bank rec. One thing to note there is the file formats there are CSV and XML. Currently for the template, you cannot use a QIF or an OFX file in the new bank rec at this time. So the first screen, much easier, much more efficient, quick data entry here. And then look at this on the next screen, all of your sorting, grouping, all of that is now available in the actual bank reconciliation. So while you're doing your bank rec, you can sort by clicking on the column header of any of the columns. I know some of you are like smiling right now, I just know it. And so you can just click on any of those columns and sort your data right while you're doing the reconciliation. There is a More Filters button that allows you to get into a lot more filters. We'll look at that in just a second. Then you can apply and clear your filters. And there are very common filters right up at the top of the screen that you can use at any time. The state, you'll notice there that state, unmatched versus matched transactions. Transaction types, you can look at just checks, you can look at deposits, you can look at all transactions. So some nice drop-down filters in there for you to be able to filter your data as well as the sorting. You see here, you can adjust how many transactions to show in the table. So up in the top right-hand corner under More Actions, there's a table size. You can choose all rows and then actually show all of your transactions in one screen, not having to go page by page by page. A little tip here, that little More Actions table size is found in a lot of different screens in Intacct. So keep an eye out for that on screens where you have a lot of rows. You might benefit from that table size setting in that screen. It's not just available in the new bank rec. And then here on the right, you see all of the different filter options. So many, many options. Down in the bottom left, you can see that you can filter for just the voided and the reversed ones, which is awesome. If you happen to have those on a regular basis, you can check those off first because you know you're going to need to clear those. So you can filter for voided and reversed, clear those off, and then continue on with any other filters. So lots of really nice new features. And then in addition, if you are importing and using the auto match feature, they've really enhanced this ability. You'll notice it's two different tabs. So previously we were over on the Intacct tab where we were looking at information. And then here is the bank tab, which shows the actual bank file and allows you to continue matching transactions that didn't match. And again, notice those filters there, state. It says unmatched. You can show matched, unmatched, or all transactions. So really nice new bank rec. Lots of people starting to use it and really loving it. So take a look at that and give that a try. Okay, on to polling question number 2, Megan.
Thanks, Irene. So our next question is hopefully pretty simple for you guys. It's an easy one. How long have you been using Sage Intacct? Just select one, less than a year, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, or more than 5 years. And hopefully, I know obviously some of you might be new to your team, so maybe you haven't personally been using it, but you're kind of welcome to share for your company or yourself, whichever is easier for you. But we will definitely, I'll give you guys a few moments here just to get your answers in. And then we'll be able to close the poll here shortly. And just as actually a reminder, we will be able to send out the recording of today's webinar and the slides afterwards. So if anyone wants to reference those later, you are welcome to utilize those on-demand ones. The CPE is only available though for those of you who are attending live today. So we will go ahead and close it. Yep, thank you. And I will pass it back to you, Irene.
Wow, so this is really interesting. Thanks, everyone. So about half of you 1 to 3 years, and then 37% less than 1 year, more than 5 years. So there's a couple of you that have been on Intacct a long time, and then a handful 3 to 5 years. Good information. Good to know. Thank you for doing that polling question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Brenda. Projects.
Okay, and before we jump into projects, we got a question that I just wanted to address because other people probably have the same question. So I mentioned on accounts payable that there is both progressive and non-progressive approval. And so the question is, what is a non-progressive approval? And people might not know that, so I thought I would answer it live. So a non-progressive approval means that the approval requests are going to be sent out based on the total amount of the bill. So you can create different levels of approvers that will approve based on the bill amount. So what this means is that if you've got something like over 100K that needs to be signed by the CEO, it doesn't have to go through 7 approvals before it gets there. It can just go to the CEO. And so you can have up to 5 different approval levels there for the appropriate level. So if you have, the most common that I see is where people say, okay, our department heads can approve up to X number, over that it needs to be an executive. So you could have all your department heads in level 1 and then all your executives in level 2. And so it would go through that. That approval pool there. Value approval, on the other hand, is where you've got, somebody approves up to 2,500, and then the next person, because they submitted something for 5,000, it would go to the first person and then the second person, and that's how you can end up, with 6 different people approving the same bill. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, please put a follow-up question into the chat. All right, and on to projects. So some exciting updates for those of you using projects in this update here. So the first one, of course, is the update to the billable transaction rules. So now you're able to bill for transactions that have been created by the transaction rules. And this is with the update to be able to allow GL transactions to be enabled as billable, which came out a few releases ago. So in order to have billable transaction rules, you must first have the general ledger transactions enabled as billable in your project configuration and setup, and you must be subscribed to project costing and billing. And so you can, when you're doing billable transaction entries such as cost plus billing based on direct labor, indirect costs, fees, or you're doing labor billing rates based on employee groups, or if you're transferring costs from entity to entity, you can have the transaction rules now be specifically add that to you. And the other exciting update is that with statistical transactions, you can now have transaction rules post to statistical transactions to a statistical journal to automate the labor hours allocation. So when you're doing a transaction rule for a statistical journal, you can just select a statistical journal instead of a regular journal type which you want the transactions to post. And then you can have that be automated as well. So for anybody that's manually posting these allocations, and especially those labor billing rates, that can be very exciting here. So for Task ID, for those of you that are already using the projects module, you are well aware of this update. So this is more for those of you that are moving into the project module in the future, maybe doing your implementation now. So task is going to be made into its own dimension. So currently it kind of piggybacks on the class dimension. So the task ID is going to be made into its own dimension. So the precursor to having this update be made is that, of course, it's going to need an ID field. So it'll have both the ID and the name. And so all of the ID fields are required on any new tasks that are being set up and used. Somebody tries to use a task that doesn't have a task ID, they will get an error message. So if you have seen this happening but didn't call us and you've just updated projects or done other changes, this is why it is happening. So the one thing that's kind of a little bit different about the task ID is it only has to be unique within the project. So you can reuse task IDs. So for example, us here at Armanino, if you're a client of us, you've probably received a bill, and if you implemented with us, that bill was split into phases. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, design and configure, implementation, testing, training, etc. So those are like standard phases standard tasks that we use on all of our projects. So we have a standard task list that gets added to every project there, and it only has to be unique within that project. So I can have tasks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on project A as well as on project B. So it's kind of the task project combination that needs to be unique. So that's definitely different from other dimensions. No idea if that's still going to continue to be the case when task becomes a real dimension, or if they're going to continue to allow that. So stay tuned for future updates. All right, contracts.
Thank you. It looks like several of the folks that answered the poll are using contracts, so some nice new things that are happening with the contract module. I know this is one that many folks have been waiting for, and that's now we have the ability for percentage of completion on a fixed fee project in contracts. So that's a nice new feature that's available, and along with that, a billing template that allows you to pick and choose which type of template you want, whether it's related to the project or the task as far as that percent complete. And if your contract includes a partial year period, you now have the option to choose full annual amount or a prorated amount for the entire schedule. So a few new little things there that are going to help with more flexibility into contracts. You can see on the screen here, this is an example of a billing schedule that was generated that's using a percent complete billing template based on the tasks planned hours. So all of that information is here in the billing schedule so that you can see that if you use that new functionality in the contracts module related to projects, of course. Another really nice feature in contracts is the ability to hold or resume multiple contract lines. Yay! So currently you had to go in and do each one of those individually. If you wanted to hold a contract schedule or release a contract that was on hold, to resume it, not release it, right? And so now, as you can see on the right there, when you open up that screen, it brings up all of the different line items are there, and then you've got the ability to select multiple lines and have that function happen for all of those lines, not have to do it one at a time. So very nice, efficient set there. No more of those one by one line item releases, resuming and holding. We say release. So very nice new features in contracts. Couple nice ones there. Brenda.
All right, on to inventory. And we're going to go through this one relatively quickly since I think there's only a couple of you folks on the line here that are actually using the inventory module. But we definitely don't want to skip it because there's some exciting updates here. So the first one is with estimated landed cost. So in the last release, they introduced landed cost actuals, which is where you receive a bill for an actual landed cost. You could create a landed cost transaction to then link the actual landed cost transaction to the original purchase, which would ensure that the inventory valuation reflected the full cost of acquiring all of the items. So usually that's going to be freight, shipping costs that come in late and after the fact. So with this release, you can now include an estimate of those anticipated landed costs when you create the original purchase transaction. And so recording that estimate up front obviously allows you at the time to have a better inventory valuation for the purchase items, more timely and more comprehensive, and the COGS, therefore more accurate when the purchased items are sold. So then you can true it up when the actual landed costs are fully known and you receive the bills for those final costs. So that's really an exciting update and improvement, kind of building on what they did in the last release. So the next update for inventory is related to automated cost of goods sold adjustments for prior periods. So when goods have been purchased and sold in a period that's now closed, updates to the cost of goods sold for the consumed items are reflected in inventory only, but not the general ledger. And so now you can automatically see and post that general ledger portion of the cost of goods sold adjustments to tie the GL to the subledger on a single page. So previously you had to manually calculate all of the variances and create journal entries to ensure the overall COGS were accurately reflected, which was super time consuming and tedious, as well as not everybody knew they needed to do that. So this is a great automation. We usually assume our subledger is posting everything to the general ledger, so it's great that now this little piece has been picked up. Okay, and then the next update is related to importing data. So this actually applies to people using more than just the inventory module. This will apply to anybody that's using items. So if you are using the purchasing or the order entry modules with non-inventory items, this also applies to you. So previously, when you imported items, the import would fail and nothing would be imported if the CSV file had any errors in it. And now you can set it so that it will import only the valid entries, even if the CSV file has other entries with errors. So we've got the screenshot up here that shows you the option that you can select now. So by default, it's going to be set to if errors occur to import the successful records only, but you can also roll back the entire thing. And so that's if there's any errors, none of it will be updated. So both options come in handy, definitely from our implementation standpoint. Both options come in handy, but even from an update standpoint. So if you had a group of things together that you wanted to, if not all of them imported because you had something going on in there, you may want to know that before you create a whole bunch of other things with the same naming convention, for example there. This is also, now they have, so previously the only place you were able to import items was under inventory on the company setup checklist, the import data area of the system. And now they've also added the ability to download and to upload to download the template and to upload the items from any place that you have items available. So that's really exciting as well. So you can do it from within the submodule. You don't always have to go to the template page. So that's exciting. There's also a few enhancements to replenishments in this release. So now you can quickly enter and review your delivered to contacts and dimensions directly in the replenish inventory page. Previously, it was a little buried there for you. And dimensions also appear at the line level on the replenishment table, and an apply default is also available. So you can update everything at once if that's so needed. All right, and then I think we have, we do, another polling question.
Thanks, Brenda. So of course, I think what we've done with some of the polling questions today is really to try and figure out what is it that you as our audience are most interested in. So this one is related to that. What aspects of the release do you feel will be most beneficial to your organization? AP bill approval, new bank reconciliation, account number on all lines of CSV exports, restricting visibility of top-level transactions, or was it something else entirely? If it's something else entirely, I'd love for you guys to be able to chat that in and let us know. This kind of thing helps us figure out what are the right things that we should be sharing with you in the future, so that Irene and Brenda can definitely get you guys the content that you're most interested in and that you're most eager to participate in. Of course, as a reminder, in order to get CPE, make sure that you've got at least about 75% of the polling questions answered today. And so we will go ahead and close that poll and show you the answers. Thank you so much. So I will pass it back to you guys.
Yeah, so this is really helpful because we want to know, also, if there's additional follow-ups or trainings that you'd like to not just necessarily on this release, but on any release. If we get requests for similar things from a lot of our clients, we're happy to do any additional webinars or do deep dive into certain features of particular modules. Just let us know. This is really these were the things we were most excited about. So happy to see you guys are also excited about the same things.
Yeah, for sure. And a question did come in. Many of you answered the bank reconciliation feature is one that you're going to be using. A question came in related to that. As you know, in the new Action UI, you see both the old bank rec and the new bank rec are both still there. Are they intertwined? If you do something in one, does it appear in the other? And for the most part, the answer is yes. So if you start the bank reconciliation in the new bank rec screen, and for whatever reason you save and close, and then you access the old bank reconciliation screen, you will see most of your information there. However, in the initial testing that I've done, not everything is always checked off. So if you've cleared a few things under the new Action UI bank rec, and then you go to the old bank UI, the old bank reconciliation, not everything was marked as cleared. So although it seems they're somewhat intertwined and linked together, it doesn't look like it's 100% yet. So that was a great question. All right, advanced Salesforce integration. Many of you are using Salesforce. We find that very common with Intacct users. The two systems talk together very nice. Most of the Salesforce integration enhancements this time are related to contacts between Intacct and Salesforce, as well as the contract module. So Intacct has been doing quite a few releases, really trying to get the contact information in sync between Salesforce and Intacct. So now you can see there's a couple new options under the sync settings. You can go in now and update billing and shipping address categories, as well as between Salesforce and Intacct. So maintaining those between the two, billing and bill two separate ones, right, depending on which area you're talking about. And then you can determine who is the owner of the settings, right? So if Intacct or Salesforce is going to be the system of record. And so you can pick never, only on the bill to, ship to, only on the billing and shipping or all of them. So some nice new features there for contact. I have to be careful because contact and contract are so close, right? And so then on contracts, if you're integrating contracts with Salesforce and Intacct, some nice features here. You can now create and sync contract lines for those that are marked as renewal only. See the little checkbox there? That's a new option that's there, and your sales folks, sales reps can mark that an opportunity is renewal only, and you can have that synced over, so that's nice. The middle bullet there has the field that is related to that, so that whoever does configurations or needs to know that information has that field there. So nice ability there to be able to sync more and more related to renewals between Intacct and contracts and Salesforce contracts. A couple other more here, a task label change. So it used to be called billing type, and now it's called project billing type. And that object enables you to assign a project billing type to the opportunity. Some other minor updates that are there. You can choose which account types are your reseller accounts. On the contract line, Intacct is supporting now the sync on the task record from Intacct back to Salesforce. And a couple other ones there support bulk synchronization of contracts and contract lines. Okay, so some nice features there, and updated and extended under the hood functionality. As always, they're constantly doing things behind the scenes to improve performance, try to remove errors that are happening, and just make it a more and more efficient talking between Salesforce and Intacct. All right, Brenda.
All righty, just a quick update here, but it's an important one. So if you are not a nonprofit, you are probably using the professional services Quickstart menu. So in the last release, they added some cool new dashboards for those of you that are using the nonprofit Quickstart. So if you missed that, there are 2 new dashboards available for you. So on this release, they were focusing on the professional services. So there's 2 new dashboards, the financial ratios dashboard and the cash analysis dashboard. And I've got snapshots of both here for you on the slide. So the financial dashboards is really just looking at those KPIs. So a series of standard kind of performance cards to help you quickly and easily track liquidity, leverage, and profitability. And the cash analysis one centralized different cash views and performance cards. So you can always see your current cash position. So pro tip for you guys, installing the dashboards first will install all reports, graphs, performance cards, etc. automatically from the dashboard. And that goes for the nonprofit Quickstart dashboards as well. So start with the dashboards, and then the majority of those reports that are also coming with those dashboards will also be included for you. So you can get those in your dashboards library. So if you're not sure where your dashboards library is, if you navigate to the word dashboards on the dashboards menu, you'll get a list view of all of the dashboards that exist. And up in the top right-hand corner, you will have your dashboards library view, and you'll have an install button next to all of the templated dashboards in the system. Okay, and then back to you, Irene.
Thank you. A couple things with platform and web services. I'm going to go ahead and just refer you to the developer portal. There's a hyperlink down here. Every time there's a new release, there are all sorts of little things that are happening related to integrations and that sort of information. I'm not going to try to explain what an API endpoint is and an XML call, gateway calls in this particular call. But basically, you know, these are new enhancements. You can see the screenshot here, lots of little things. So make sure that if you've got an integration or somebody's doing something with web services to your Intacct company, that they're aware of this and they're going out and checking this every time there's a new release and making sure that any new enhancements are being applied to integrations that you have happening. In addition, there's lots of little things related to the web services, list entity details for a current user. So these are things that they're enhancing when you're doing web services calls. So this is outside of Intacct, right? And things that you're looking for outside of Intacct. So lots of little things here. Again, we're not going to go through these one by one. but make sure that if you are using web services or have an integration that you're reviewing these every time there's a new release. Thank you. Brenda.
All right, quick update to global consolidations, but it's a big one. So centralized journals, now there'll only be one per book. So if you have a current consolidation that is set up, this will not affect your current consolidations. It's only going to affect new consolidation books that are set up on a go-forward basis. So if you need to fundamentally change something about your consolidation, like what account your balance sheet adjustments and currency fluctuations are going to, or you need to change something other fundamental, like on that first setup screen, you would need to create a new consolidation book. So if you add new entities to your existing consolidation, you'll still need to add in a set of unique journals for that entity because it's set up under the old consolidation setup. So historical consolidations are preserved as is, and nothing will change on those in the future, is what they're telling us now. So the other nice enhancement is that they've also added a first period consolidated with data column on the journals tab. So if you are adding entities, new entities that are existing either because you just started them up or because you did an acquisition, you can now merge those entities in and you can see when each entity had data for the first time right from the consolidation page. So definitely an ease of use enhancement there rather than trying to figure things out by going through old journal postings. All right, back to you, Irene.
Okay, excellent. Really cool new feature. You guys know they're continually enhancing their audit trail, and this one is one that I know we've had lots of requests for. It was an idea in the portal, and that is more visibility in opening and closing periods in the audit trail. So look at all the cool fields that they've added. You can now see what was closed, right, to the end of the period, month ended January 2014. Somebody's way back in the past. Which entities were either closed or opened. So really nice new enhancement to the audit trail in the open and close books and subledger screen. Love that. In addition, you can now export permissions for a particular user. So if you are viewing the permissions and roles for a particular user in the past, all you could do was scroll down and look at this. Now, as you can see, you can actually export this to Excel or CSV, which is really nice. That way it allows you to kind of filter, do search, have a little more visibility into the specific permissions and roles for that particular user. Love that. Another enhancement that they've done is the ability this is an expansion that came out in 2018 release 4, right? And you were able to save transactions in purchasing, order entry, and inventory without reposting. So as you know, Intacct is a live system. So if you make a change to a document based on your permissions, based on settings, the flexibility you have allowed within those transactions, if you can make edits, even if you made a minor change, Intacct was basically reposting that entire journal entry behind the scenes if it's a posting document, which can take some time. So now Intacct is only posting specific things based on what you're changing in the system. So I think I've got that on the next page here. Yeah, so when you're editing a non-financial field in a transaction and you click post, Intacct saves the transaction instead of recreating the journal entry. So as you can see here in order entry and purchasing, if you change the ship via, the item description, or custom fields that have unique IDs from the custom fields on the AP bill or AR invoice, then Intacct is only saving the transaction. It's not reposting it because those are things that are not in the journal entry itself. Inventory, reference number, message, item description, custom fields. So again, they're continuing to allow more flexibility in that it's not necessarily always posting the full transaction. The other thing that I want to share is a little hidden gem, and I honestly don't know when this came about in Intacct, but under your preferences, if you're in Intacct right now and you go to My Preferences, at the very bottom of My Preferences is now a checkbox that allows you to tell Intacct when you are in a workflow in order entry, purchasing, or inventory, and you are converting. Out of the box, in the past, Intacct always took you to the next step in the workflow. Now you have the option to stay in the same screen you were in. So if you're converting purchase orders to vendor invoices, as an example, you can now just stay in the purchase order screen and continue to convert. It doesn't automatically have to take you to the vendor invoice. So go under My Preferences, take a look at that little checkbox at the bottom of the screen if you use any order entry, purchasing, or inventory workflows, because you can set your preference on how you want to move in that workflow. I'm not sure, Brenda, when that came about, but I just found it the other day and I was like, what? When did that come in?
Yeah, that was the last release.
Oh, was it? I just totally missed it somehow.
It got buried with all the other like new products that came out.
There you go.
Very exciting. All right, polling question 4.
And hopefully, again, this one is super easy. You only have two possible answers here. There is something in this release that my organization can use immediately. Hopefully your answer here is true. If not, definitely still answer, because that is definitely information that we can use. Obviously, we're always trying to make sure that we get you guys the best information possible on these webinars. And it actually looks like a lot of you have already voted in, so we can go ahead and close this one a little bit early. So hopefully, as you know, it looks like a lot of you can use some of this info immediately. So that's great to hear. So Irene, I will pass it back to you to conclude.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes left, and we do have a few polling questions. We've covered quite a few things today. Not polling questions, hello. Q&A questions. Are there any of those that we want to answer in this, Brenda? I know there's one related to the importing of data on inventory.
Yeah. It's really hard for me to see them, so I'm trying to get a bigger view of them. Oh,
yeah, if you click the little
yep,
doc.
I did. I just saw it. So yeah, let me take a look at this.
And I know we answered the bank question in there. You answered what is progressive, non-progressive in the approval process.
And I can
this question is about the items, right? If they're updatable, is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
So good news, items are mass updatable from template. And so just like any other template that is mass updatable, and in case you're not aware, that will be any of your ACH information for employees or vendors, your customer template, your vendor template, and your budget template are also mass updatable. So what that means is when you update via template, Intacct will overwrite whatever is in there with whatever is in your template. And what it does is it uses the ID field to identify, because remember, there's always one thing about every object in the system that once saved, you cannot change. And that's because the system needs an object code to be able to hold on to be able to track that throughout the system. So the one thing you cannot update, of course, on an item is the item ID itself, but everything else is mass updatable via template. So the caution there is that null is a value. So if you nullify that value, or you pull it out and then you update it, it is also easy to blank out all of your vendor, customer, ACH, or item or budget information. So you want to be very careful when updating via template, because you can also wipe out your data at light speed as well as update it. So in terms of a best practice, what my recommendation would be is to create a view on your item and that has all of the fields that you want to do any updates to. Export that view into a template. Make the changes you want to make. Don't touch anything you don't want to change, and then upload that exact template back up again. So that way you know you're preserving all of the data that was already in there. So if on, item A, you want to update the GL group, but on item B, you need to update the base price. You can do them both in the same update template and include both fields as long as each has their respective value and not a null value in there. Anything you would add to that, Irene?
No, that's excellent. And I was going to say the same thing. I take just a slightly different approach. When I do an export and I save that export, and then I make a second copy for my import, so I can always go back to where I was if I need to.
Yeah,
same
good
concept,
point.
right? Same concept. Just be careful. The goal here is be careful that you don't wipe out data and not have access to it. So
Yeah,
for sure. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the other thing is, if you're not aware, Intacct keeps their backups for 3 days. So don't ever do a project like this on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, there you go.
Because by the time you get in on Monday, even the backups are going to be erased. So these are early in the week changes you want to make. Definitely keep a backup copy of exactly what you have, because then you can always restore it later. That's a great tip. And thank you for asking it, because I'm sure other people have questions about updatable templates as well. Another question on here, will the task ID eventually auto-populate? Potentially, it's possible. I don't have that answer today. We'll find out when it becomes a real dimension. As you know, some of the dimensions can be auto-numbered, and some of the dimensions cannot. So it's possible that they will allow some auto-numbering for tasks, because they do allow auto-numbering of projects. But we'll have to wait and see. We're not sure what the answer is going to be on that particular one.
Right.
All right. Anybody else have any questions?
Did you answer the one on the manager approval? Can you assign a manager based on department?
Oh, yes. So transaction department approval is one of the current approvals that is allowed in AP bills. So you can pick a different manager per department. Just when you're updating your departments, there's a spot for department manager. You'll just drop in the different employee record for each one of your different managers on the department itself. And then you can set the routing. If somebody codes it to department 100, route it to manager A, versus if it's coded to department 200, it'll be routed to manager B.
Excellent.
All right, I think that's all.
Well, thank you both for all of that amazing content. And then, of course, to our awesome audience for providing all of those great questions. If you guys do have any additional questions, or if there's any chance that we missed one today, we will double check, of course. But you are always welcome to reach out to Brenda or Irene directly, or anyone on the Armanino team, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction. Of course, feel free to take a look at all of the release notes, and keep an eye out for this webinar recording and the slides to come shortly. We'll get them to you guys in a couple of days here, but of course you're welcome to share them with your team for anyone who couldn't make it with us live, and we'll be able to get the CPE out to you shortly as well. But remember, if you're looking to do the CPE, definitely remember to take that quick survey at the end. Our learning and development team will check for those and get the certificates out to everyone who was eligible after today's webinar. And that will wrap it up for today. So again, thank you, Irene and Brenda, and thank you to our audience for joining us on our first Sage Intacct webinar of the year.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the week, folks.